There's a lot of talk at the moment about instructions and advice, with us anticipating some new guidance from the Prime Minister along the lines of stay alert, control the virus, save lives. So it's interesting that our reading this morning should contain some advice and instructions that seem particularly apt for a time of crisis such as this. And the first bit of advice is, do not let your hearts be troubled, but rather trust in Jesus. Now, the setting for John chapter 14 is the Last Supper. Jesus has explained to his disciples that he's going to be betrayed. Judas has already left. And Peter has been told that he's going to let Jesus down. These were worrying times. The next 24 hours are going to be really, really difficult. So Jesus says to them, do not let your hearts be troubled. That is, do not let yourself become disturbed, agitated, churned up by all that's about to happen. This isn't talking about a low-level anxiety, I'm a little bit concerned about one or two things. This is about what happens when you have a sucker punch to the chest, when everything gets on top of you. It is what happened in the heart of Jesus when his friend Lazarus died. It says that when Jesus saw Mary, that's Lazarus' sister, weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. It's the same word. So Jesus is saying, do not be disturbed. Don't let your heart become all churned up. Now, every one of us worries. It's natural, it's human. And in the Bible, the command, do not worry or do not be afraid, occurs at least around 150 times. It is the most repeated command. And I'm sure that it is what God is saying to us at the moment. Do not let your heart be troubled. And partly I think God says that because worry achieves nothing. There is a Swedish proverb that says worry often gives a small thing a big shadow. And Winston Churchill famously said, I remember the story of an old man who said on his deathbed that he had a lot of trouble in his life, most of which never happened. We worry needlessly, and our worrying achieves nothing. It's like revving the engine while the clutch is not engaged. It takes a lot of energy, it consumes a lot of time, but it doesn't get us any further forward. Don't let your hearts be troubled. And stuff happens, things go wrong, but even then we're not to worry. 24 hours after Jesus told his disciples to not let their hearts be troubled, Jesus himself was dead. The disciples' extraordinary 3-year adventure had come to an end. Their leader had been taken from them. Their world had been turned upside down. What were they to do then? You see, the key thing for them was not to act out of their feelings of anxiety and not to rush headlong into panic and crisis management. They had to somehow trust God. And the key for us in these troublous times is to trust God. Even when it feels that God isn't on top of the situation, we need to remember that he's trustworthy, that he knows what he's about, that he is at work even when we do not perceive it. I'm not one of those who believes that everything happens for a reason. I've heard it said by good people at moments of real pain and tragedy, and I know why they say it. It is comforting to think that everything happens for a reason. But I don't think it's true. I do not believe that God makes bad things happen. But I do believe that when they do, God's loving creativity is at work, redeeming that tragedy into a wider triumph. God is not in control in that sense, but he is at work. And we need to trust him, especially in times like these when there is so much that we could worry about. God knows what he is about. He holds you in the palm of his hand, and his loving care is ever exercised upon you. So don't be anxious. Don't let your hearts be troubled, but trust in God. The second bit of advice is to follow Jesus. Jesus said to his disciples, "You know the way to the place where I'm going." But Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way?" One writer in his commentary on John's Gospel said Thomas was utterly honest, pessimistic and uninhibited. He did not suppress his feelings but voiced his despair. When saying that he did not know where Jesus was going and so did not know the way, he says Thomas despaired of ever learning the way and was not ready to accept a state of permanent bewilderment. His question revealed a man who was confused by life and felt that its riddles were insolvable. When we are confused by life and feel that its riddles are insolvable, what do we do? And more importantly, how do we then make decisions about the future? How do you ensure that you get it right? Well, Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life." He didn't say, "I'll tell you the way." He didn't say, "This is the way." He said, "I am the way." Christianity isn't primarily about a set of rules, nor is it primarily about a set of beliefs. It's about a person. It's about a personal relationship with Jesus. And if you want to know the way, if you want to know what to do, then the best thing is to stick close to Jesus. God is doing stuff. He's at work in your life. He's at work in this situation in which we find ourselves. He is at work in the world. And all you need to do is to follow him. And that means that in order to make good and wise decisions, in order to know the way to go, then you will need to spend time in prayer. You need to come close to Jesus and then stay close to Jesus. And sometimes you will need to stop and reflect and reconnect with God. There's a lovely image hidden in our reading. Jesus says, "In my Father's house there are many dwelling places." And in doing so, he's alluding to a journey. In those days, when you were on a journey, you would send someone ahead of you who would set up the camp, light the fires, get the tea ready, get everything ready so that when the other travellers got there, they could rest. And Jesus painted this picture, I think, so that we remember that even in the midst of what might be for some really intense activity, we need to sometimes stop, to rest, and simply to dwell with Jesus. The story's told of a South American tribe that went on a long march day after day after day, when all of a sudden they would stop walking, sit down and rest for a while, and then make camp for a couple of days before going any further. They explained that they needed the time in order for their souls to catch up with the rest of them. Maybe this time now, with a slightly different cadence, a more settled and certainly more sedentary existence, maybe now is a good time to reflect, to maybe journal some thoughts, to spend more time in reflective, contemplative prayer. Don't be anxious, but trust in God. And stick close to Jesus, who will lead you in the way that you should go. And finally, live life to the full. Be ready to fulfill your potential. Jesus said just a few verses on from our reading, "Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact will do greater works than these." You are heirs to that promise. You are a people who will do great things. Your love and care for others changes things for them, transforms their lives, and makes this world a better, safer place. Through you, people will hear a message of hope that will bring new life to them. It will bring lightness to their despair, and it will free them from all that is dragging them down or holding them back. You can and you will do great things. And I say that with the utmost confidence because the Spirit of the living God is at work with you and in you and through you. God's very self is present with you now, and he is at work in your midst. I remember once my wife asked a friend of mine if he believed in God. At the time, my friend was training for ministry in the Church of England and was somewhat unaccustomed to being asked such a direct question about his personal beliefs, but it made him think. For what my wife was asking him was not, are you intellectually satisfied that there exists some kind of deity? No, what she was asking was, does it make a difference? Do you believe that God can make a difference? Do you believe that God can change your situation? That's what it comes down to. It's about you being made strong, as St. Paul says, strong with all the strength that comes from God's glorious power. You know, God said to Joshua, this is how it reads in the Good News version, remember I have commanded you to be determined and confident. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for I, the Lord your God, am with you wherever you go. So, don't be anxious, but trust in God. And stick close to Jesus, who will lead you in the way that you should go. And be ready to fulfill your potential. These are the instructions. May God bless you as you follow them. Keep safe and keep well.